Today's Talk About It Tuesday question is, when starting a business, what's the biggest hurdle most people face? So I've been doing business consulting for about 20 years now. And I will say that there are about 5 hurdles that I see that come up consistently when people start a business. So instead of choosing one, I'm going to tell you all 5, and not necessarily in order of frequency, but they all are common mistakes. And most people make more than one of these mistakes when they start a business. And these hurdles, if not overcome, will result in failure. So the number one that I'm going to start with, again, in no particular order, is that most people, when I say, who's your target market, right? Because they're saying, I'm not getting all the sales that I want. Who's your target market? Who are you trying to sell to? Most people tell me everybody. And the moment they tell me everybody, I say you are doomed to failure unless you can identify your target market. So when I say target market, I mean age, gender, ethnic background, income level, education level, how they spend their leisure time, what they worry about at night, how they tend to spend their money, how much money do they tend to spend on particular things, what are their hobbies, what are their likes. You have to know everything about your target market so you know how to create a product or service that meets their wants, not their needs. When people tell me, well, everybody needs it. No, a particular product that meets their wants exactly, that they're willing to pay for, that's delivered to them in a manner that they prefer. And there's no way for you to create targeted marketing to reach that demographic if you don't know who that demographic is. So your family and friends are not your target market. People who look like you are not your target market. You have to know who you're trying to sell to. So if you have not identified a clear target market for your product or service, then you are setting yourself up for failure because you'll never reach them. You'll never reach the people who are going to buy from you. Along those lines, having a product or service that is not only profitable, but scalable. So people tell me, well, everybody needs this thing, right? So they come up with some, I don't know, it could be some elixir for super health. Everybody needs this thing, but everybody doesn't want that thing. So people don't buy what they need, they buy what they want. And so if you haven't created a product that, again, is saleable but scalable, right? So when I say scalable, meaning that people will buy it over and over again, and that you can increase your market, your sales volume over time. If you are a service provider and you're the sole service provider for your business, you can only scale with so much because there's only so many days in an hour, so many people you can service. That is not scalable. Even if it's saleable, it's not scalable unless you figure out a way to duplicate your efforts. Maybe you bring in more people, maybe you sell it online where you can reach more people. Somehow you have to change that. So if you don't have a product that is, number one, saleable, and 2, scalable, then you're going to set yourself up for failure. So don't assume because it's something everybody needs that everybody wants it. And then there's certain problems that aren't worth solving because they're too expensive to solve. I'm sure you can build a better mousetrap, but a glue trap or an old snap trap works fine. A little poison works fine. So even if you could come up with something better, doesn't mean people will pay for that new thing that's better because we have something that's good enough, that's inexpensive. So that's another problem. I think a big problem is failing to test your product or service on a small scale before you launch it. So a lot of times we create the perfect product or service in our own minds. And, we assume because we like it that the world will like it. But that's a huge error. So the rule is test small, lose small, right? Test big, lose big. So what you're going to do is create your initial product, and you're going to test it on who you believe your demographic is, and allow them to give you feedback about your product or service before you make improvements and then launch it on a bigger scale. If you put all the bells and whistles in it because you just assume people will want it and you launch it, you've wasted a lot of money and you're going to waste a lot of time trying to start all over. So you want to do small iterations at a time, right? You want to put out what they call a minimal viable product. The thing, okay, this is just good enough to get to the market. Let the market tell me how to fix it. Let my demographic tell me how maybe they want it delivered a different way. Maybe they want, some kind of feature that I don't have. Maybe there's too many features that nobody cares about. So you have to test it. You have to test it. You have to test it and refine it. Test it and refine it. Test it and refine it until you have that product that people are willing to pay that premium price for repeatedly and tell their friends about, which will allow you to scale. I think another one is creating an infrastructure for success. So I often have people tell me, well, I'm going to start small, and then when I get bigger, nope, you're going to fail, because if your product or service is really good, but you don't have the infrastructure in place to meet the demand, you're going to implode, right? And you only get one shot, right? You really only get one shot at that huge opportunity to be able to scale this thing, because the orders are coming in. And when you fail to meet orders, you fail to impress that big client, you fail to be able to keep up with demand, people are going to go elsewhere. And they're not going to come back to you because you're just not reliable. So you have to project your growth, and you have to be ahead of that in terms of your infrastructure, meaning you have to have the capacity or the capability to produce a larger amount than you're producing. You have to have the human resources to be able to support what you're doing. You have to have the capital available to support larger than what you start out with, because you go into it with the intent to grow. So you have to create an infrastructure that supports growth. I think I'll just kind of end with one more. Funding is a major problem. So we talked about being able to build an infrastructure, right? That's larger than where you're going to start. You want your product to grow into the infrastructure, not the infrastructure to try to keep up or catch up with your product. That takes capital, because you're going to have to be a little bit larger than probably the money's coming in the beginning. We talked about having to test your product and do multiple iterations, your product or service, and do multiple iterations before you hit your stride and that thing starts to grow. That takes capital. We talked about, having a team around you. That takes capital, right? So that's part of your infrastructure. You're having a team and the human resources. That takes capital. The ability to put that product out there and run it initially at a loss and then to your break even before you become profitable, that takes capital, right? So that means you have to fund this thing with the expectation of, in the beginning, it's not going to be profitable, because that's your testing phase. That's your growth phase. You have to go into it with the idea that it might take a while before this thing, catches traction and takes off. That means you have to be able to fund the business until that happens. So if you have a brick and mortar, you still have to pay your rent. If you have suppliers, you still have to pay your suppliers. If you have employees, you still have to pay your employees. You still have to pay yourself so you can survive. So if you're underfunded, because you figure, I just need enough money to make that initial product, and in your mind, you're going to hit the right target market, it's going to be the perfect product, and you're going to get all these sales just because, then you're mistaken. So I think all that boils down to having a proper business plan. I'm not talking about a business plan to get funding, because you need that too, but a real dynamic business plan that allows you to predict into the future how your business is going to scale, including your testing phase, including how you're going to market, including choosing the right demographic and speaking to them in your marketing in a way that gets action. So I think those are the big hurdles. I'd love to hear the challenges that you have faced or the things that you fear as a business owner or a potential business owner. But please like, share, subscribe, keep the questions coming, and I'll see you next Tuesday.